David thinks he owns it. I think he thinks that because I left the band in 1985, that he owns Pink Floyd, that he is Pink Floyd.
The music was groundbreaking, the concerts were legendary, but behind the scenes, a war was brewing at Pink Floyd. Roger Waters, the driving force behind the band, has finally opened up about the toxic power struggles, creative clashes, and bitter betrayals that tore them apart. The truth will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about one of the greatest bands in history. And even before that, Roger's journey to make that brand is also interesting. So let's start from the beginning. Roger Waters was born in Great Bookham, Surrey, in 1943. He was the younger of two boys, with a father who was a school teacher and a devout Christian, and a mother who was also a teacher. Waters' father, Eric Fletcher Waters, was a complex figure. He was a strong supporter of the Labour Party and a member of the Communist Party. When World War II broke out, he initially believed in pacifism and worked as an ambulance driver during the Blitz. However, he later changed his views and joined the army, where he tragically lost his life in battle when Roger was just 5 months old. This loss deeply affected Roger's childhood and would later influence his music, particularly the themes of war and loss that are prominent in Pink Floyd's albums. After Eric's death, Roger's mother, Mary, moved the family to Cambridge, where she raised her two sons alone. Roger's earliest memory is of the VJ Day celebrations, marking the end of World War II. Even as a young child, Roger experienced the harsh realities of life and the devastating impact of war. In Cambridge, a young Roger Waters attended Morley Memorial Junior School, and later the Cambridgeshire High School for Boys, where he crossed paths with a fellow student who would also become a music legend, Syd Barrett. The future Pink Floyd guitarist, David Gilmour, lived nearby and attended a different school, but their paths would eventually converge in the world of music. At 15, Waters was already showing signs of his activist spirit, becoming the chairman of the Cambridge Youth Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. He even designed their publicity poster. Despite his rebellious streak, he was a well-liked student and excelled in sports, playing both cricket and rugby for the school teams. But school wasn't all sunshine and roses for Waters. He later described his experience as oppressive and admitted that he hated every minute of it, except for sports. He felt the school's strict regime was stifling and that both students and teachers could be bullies. In 1962, Waters moved to London to attend the Regent Street Polytechnic School of Architecture. This was a surprising choice for someone who would later become a rock star, but a series of aptitude tests suggested he had a knack for architecture. Initially, he had considered a career in mechanical engineering, but his path led him to architecture instead. It was at the Regent Street Polytechnic that Waters met Nick Mason and Richard Wright. They became a good friend and started spending time with each other. By September 1963, Roger Waters and Nick Mason were tired of their studies. They decided to move into a flat in Stanhope Gardens, owned by a part-time tutor at their school. This marked a turning point in their lives as they began to focus more on music than academics. Together with their friend Richard Wright, they started playing music with vocalist Keith Noble and bassist Clive Metcalf. They experimented with different band names, like Sigma 6 and the Megadeths, but mostly went by Sigma 6. Noble's sister, Sheila, would sometimes join them on vocals. In the early days, they played mostly at private parties and rehearsed in a cozy tea room in the basement of their school. But things changed when Metcalf and Noble left to form their own band. The remaining members, eager to keep the music going, invited two new guys to join: Syd Barrett, a talented guitarist, and Bob Close. With Waters switching to bass, the band was ready for a fresh start. By January 1964, they had become the Abdabs, or sometimes the Screaming Abdabs. They went through a few more name changes, like Leonard's Lodgers, Spectrum 5, and the T-Set, before finally settling on Pink Floyd in early 1966. It was a name inspired by two blues musicians, Pink Anderson and Floyd Council. and it would soon become synonymous with groundbreaking music and legendary performances. By early 1966, Pink Floyd had found its core identity, with Syd Barrett leading the charge. He was the band's frontman, guitarist, and main songwriter. Their debut album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, released in 1967, showcased his talents. He wrote or co-wrote nearly every song on the album. The lone exception was a track by Roger Waters called "Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk." However, by the end of 1967, things began to unravel. Barrett's mental health was deteriorating, and his behavior became increasingly erratic. This made it difficult for him to continue as the band's lead creative force. In early 1968, the band, along with their managers, met to discuss the future. It was a tough decision, but everyone agreed that Barrett could no longer contribute in the way he once did. He left the band, and as part of the agreement, his former managers retained rights related to his past work with Pink Floyd. With a new manager, Steve O'Rourke, on board, Pink Floyd announced a changing of the guard. Syd Barrett was out, and David Gilmour was officially brought in to fill the void. After Syd Barrett left the band in 1968, Roger Waters stepped up and took the reins as Pink Floyd's artistic leader. He was the one with the vision, steering the band's musical direction towards his own interests, which were more political and philosophical than Barrett's whimsical style. In 1970, Waters collaborated with Ron Geeson to create Music from the Body, a soundtrack for a documentary. It was a unique project that showcased Waters' experimental side and his willingness to explore different genres. Waters' influence on Pink Floyd's music grew over time. He became the main songwriter and lyricist, often sharing lead vocals with David Gilmour and sometimes Richard Wright. Throughout the late 70s, he was the driving force behind the band's creative output, leading up to his departure in 1985. With Roger Waters at the helm, Pink Floyd released The Dark Side of the Moon in 1973. This album, with all its lyrics written by Waters, became a musical phenomenon. It stayed on the Billboard charts for an incredible 736 weeks straight, selling over 40 million copies worldwide. Even in 2005, it was still selling thousands of copies every week. It's the second best-selling album in the world, and one of the top-selling albums in the US. Waters was proud of the album's impact. He remembered playing it for his wife and seeing her move to tears. He knew then that he had created something special, something that resonated with people on a deep level. Waters' personal experiences and ideas heavily influenced Pink Floyd's music during this time. The albums The Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, The Wall, and The Final Cut were all concept albums, meaning they told stories or explored specific themes. One recurring theme in Waters' lyrics was the cost of war and the loss of his father in World War II. This theme appeared in several songs, from Corporal Clegg on their earlier album A Saucerful of Secrets to When the Tigers Broke Free and The Fletcher Memorial Home on The Final Cut, an album dedicated to his father. The Wall, another iconic Pink Floyd album, was deeply influenced by Waters' childhood experiences growing up in a post-war English society. The album explores themes of isolation, loss, and the emotional barriers we build around ourselves. In 1979, Pink Floyd released The Wall, a monumental double album that was almost entirely written by Roger Waters. It's a deeply personal work, heavily based on Waters' own life experiences. The album's themes of isolation, abandonment, and the pressures of fame resonated with millions, making it one of the best-selling albums of all time. In the US alone, it has sold over 23 million copies. To bring this ambitious project to life, Pink Floyd hired Bob Ezrin as co-producer and the talented cartoonist Gerald Scarfe to create the album's iconic artwork. They also embarked on a massive tour called The Wall Tour, with elaborate stage shows featuring a giant wall being built and then torn down. The final performance of this tour, in 1981 at Earl's Court in London, would be the last time Pink Floyd played with Roger Waters, until a brief reunion at the Live 8 concert in 2005. In 1983, Pink Floyd released what would be their last album with Waters' The Final Cut. This album was essentially a Roger Waters solo project, with him writing all the music and lyrics. It was a dark and politically charged album, with lyrics criticizing the British government and even mentioning Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher by name. The making of The Final Cut was fraught with tension and creative differences between Waters and the other band members, particularly David Gilmour. Gilmour wanted to delay recording so he could write some songs, but Waters refused. This led to Gilmour's name being removed from the production credits, even though he still got paid. Despite the internal struggles, The Final Cut was a critical success. Rolling Stone magazine gave it 5 stars, calling it a superlative achievement and art rock's crowning masterpiece. The tensions within Pink Floyd, which had been simmering for years, finally boiled over in 1985 when Roger Waters decided to leave the band. Creative differences had become irreconcilable, and Waters felt that the band had lost its creative spark. In December of that year, he officially notified the record companies, EMI and CBS, of his departure, invoking a clause in his contract. The split wasn't amicable. In 1986, Waters took legal action to dissolve the Pink Floyd partnership, arguing that the band was no longer a viable creative entity. He even called them a spent force creatively. But David Gilmour and Nick Mason, the remaining members, weren't ready to let go of the Pink Floyd name. They wanted to continue making music under the same banner. This led to a bitter legal battle over the rights to the band's name and material. Waters felt that Pink Floyd without him was a betrayal of their legacy. He compared it to Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr trying to perform as the Beatles without John Lennon. It just didn't feel right. He was afraid that Gilmour and Mason would bring in new people to write the music, which he saw as an insult to their previous work. The legal dispute dragged on until 1987, when Waters and the remaining members of Pink Floyd finally reached an agreement. Waters was released from his management contract and retained the rights to specific Pink Floyd creations, like the concept for the wall and the inflatable pig from Animals.
It's him, it's idiosyncratic, it's different to any other player, and has that indefinable something that great players have.
Despite the settlement, the split left a sour taste in everyone's mouths. Pink Floyd went on to release 3 more studio albums without Waters, but their sound and direction were noticeably different. In 1999, Gilmour revealed that Waters had even declined an invitation to perform The Dark Side of the Moon with the band at a concert in London. In 2005, Roger Waters reflected on his departure from Pink Floyd. He admitted that it had been a bad, negative time and acknowledged his role in creating that negativity. He expressed regret for trying to force his feelings about the band's worth and work onto the other members, recognizing that they didn't necessarily share his perspective. It was a moment of self-awareness and a realization that his actions had contributed to the conflict. In a surprising turn of events, the seemingly impossible happened. In July 2005, Roger Waters, David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright reunited on stage as Pink Floyd for a one-time performance at the Live 8 concert in London's Hyde Park. It was the first time they had played together in 24 years, since their last performance of The Wall in 1981. The band delivered a powerful 23-minute set, playing some of their most iconic songs like Money, Wish You Were Here, and Comfortably Numb. It was an emotional reunion for both the band and the audience, who were thrilled to see the legendary group back together. However, despite the positive experience, Waters admitted that the chances of a full-fledged reunion were slim. He and Gilmour still had differing opinions about the band's direction and musical choices. While Waters had wanted to play a different set of songs, he ultimately agreed to roll over for one night only. Despite the lingering disagreements, the Live 8 performance was a powerful testament to Pink Floyd's enduring legacy and the impact their music had on generations of fans. It was a brief but memorable moment of unity for a band that had been through so much turmoil. Later that year, in November 2005, Pink Floyd was inducted into the UK Music Hall of Fame, a fitting tribute to their contributions to music history. In 1984, Roger Waters embarked on a new musical journey, stepping away from Pink Floyd to release his first solo album, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. This wasn't your typical rock album. It was a deeply personal exploration of Waters' own feelings about love, commitment, and the allure of a carefree lifestyle. The story follows a character named Reg, who grapples with the conflicting desires for a stable family life and the freedom of the open road. It's a musical journey through Reg's dreams and fantasies, filled with vivid imagery and introspective lyrics. To bring this unique vision to life, Waters enlisted the help of some big names. Eric Clapton, the legendary guitarist, added his signature bluesy sound to the album, while jazz saxophonist David Sanborn brought a touch of soulful improvisation. The album's artwork, created by the talented Gerald Scarfe, who had also worked on Pink Floyd's The Wall, added another layer of visual storytelling to the project. However, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking wasn't universally praised. Some critics, like Kurt Loder, found it to be a strange and unappealing album, even giving it a harsh one-star rating in Rolling Stone. But others, like Mike Dagan of AllMusic, saw it as a brilliant and symbolic work, praising its innovative use of stream of consciousness and dreamlike imagery. Despite the mixed reception of his solo debut, Waters didn't let that deter him. In 1984, he hit the road with Eric Clapton and a new band to tour The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. The shows were a mix of new material and classic Pink Floyd songs, giving fans a taste of both worlds. The tour kicked off in Stockholm on June 16th, but it wasn't exactly a smooth ride. Ticket sales were disappointing, leading to cancellations at some larger venues. Waters later admitted that he lost a significant amount of money on the tour, but he didn't give up. He took the show to North America in 1985, playing smaller venues under the name The Pros and Cons plus some old Pink Floyd stuff. It was a way to connect with his dedicated fans and showcase his music in a more intimate setting. Despite the initial setbacks, the album eventually went gold, a testament to its growing popularity. Waters continued to explore his creative talents beyond music. In 1986, he contributed songs and a score to the animated film When the Wind Blows, a poignant story about a couple facing the aftermath of a nuclear attack. His band for this project was called the Bleeding Heart Band, featuring singer Paul Carrack. In 1987, Waters released his second solo album, Radio Chaos. This concept album told the story of Billy, a mute man from a struggling Welsh mining town who could hear radio waves in his head. Billy's journey is one of empowerment and rebellion, as he learns to communicate with a radio DJ and eventually control the world's computers. Frustrated with the state of the world, he fakes a nuclear attack to try and bring about change. Following the album's release, Waters embarked on another tour in 1987, bringing the story of Radio Chaos to life on stage. Despite the challenges he faced with his previous tour, Waters continued to push creative boundaries and explore new ways to express his ideas through music. Held on the vast expanse of land between Potsdamer Platz and the Brandenburg Gate, the concert was a spectacle like no other. It's estimated that over 200,000 people attended in person, with some estimates doubling that number. But that's not all. A staggering 1 billion people tuned in to watch the live broadcast on television. This massive event wasn't just for entertainment. Leonard Cheshire, a British philanthropist, asked Waters to put on the show to raise money for charity. Waters gathered a star-studded lineup of musicians to join him, including Joni Mitchell, Van Morrison, Cyndi Lauper, Bryan Adams, The Scorpions, and Sinead O'Connor. He even enlisted the talents of an East German symphony orchestra and choir, a Soviet marching band, and helicopters from the US military. The stage design was just as impressive as the performers. A colossal wall, 82 feet tall and 550 feet long, was built across the set, designed by Mark Fisher. Giant inflatable puppets, based on Gerald Scarfe's original artwork for the Wall album, towered over the stage. It was a visual feast that captivated the audience. While many rock icons received invitations to the show, Waters' former bandmates, Gilmour, Mason, and Wright, were notably absent. Despite the absence of the full Pink Floyd lineup, the concert was a resounding success. Waters later released a double album of the performance, which went platinum in the United States. In 1990, a fresh start was in the air for Roger Waters. He hired a new manager, Mark Fenwick, and switched record labels, signing a global deal with Columbia. This set the stage for his third solo album, Amused to Death, released in 1992. This album wasn't just any collection of songs. It was a powerful and thought-provoking concept album, heavily influenced by the Tiananmen Square protests and the Gulf War. Waters used the album to criticize the idea of war becoming entertainment, especially on television. The title itself was a nod to the book Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, which explores how media can distract us from important issues. Waters brought in a talented team to help him create this ambitious project. Patrick Leonard, who had worked on Pink Floyd's A Momentary Lapse of Reason, co-produced the album. The legendary guitarist Jeff Beck lent his skills to many of the tracks, and a whole cast of musicians contributed their talents. The album was recorded in 10 different studios, showcasing the effort and dedication that went into its creation. Amused to Death was a critical hit, with many comparing it favorably to Waters' work with Pink Floyd. Waters himself considered it one of his best works, alongside Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall. The song What God Wants But One even became a minor hit, reaching number 35 in the UK and number 5 on Billboard's Mainstream Rock Tracks chart in the US. Despite its critical acclaim, Amused to Death didn't achieve the same commercial success as some of Waters' earlier albums. It sold around 1 million copies, but there was no tour to support it. Fans would have to wait 7 years to hear some of its songs live during Waters' In the Flesh tour in 1999. But even without a tour, Amused to Death solidified Waters' reputation as a solo artist. It was a bold and ambitious work that showcased his unique vision and unwavering commitment to social commentary. And in 1996, his contributions to music were officially recognized when he was inducted into both the US and UK Rock and Roll Halls of Fame as a member of Pink Floyd. In 1999, after a long break from touring, Roger Waters decided it was time to hit the road again. His In the Flesh tour was a major event, featuring a mix of his solo work and classic Pink Floyd songs. The tour was a huge success, especially in the US. Even though he had booked smaller venues, the demand for tickets was so high that many of the shows were moved to bigger places. The In the Flesh tour lasted for 3 years, spanning across the globe and culminating in a grand finale at the Glastonbury Festival in 2002. Waters played for a massive crowd of 70,000 people, performing 15 Pink Floyd songs and 5 of his own. It was a triumphant return to the stage for the legendary musician. But Waters wasn't just focused on touring. In 2004, Miramax announced that The Wall would be turned into a Broadway musical, with Waters playing a key role in its creation. The musical was set to include songs from The Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and other Pink Floyd albums, along with some new material. While the Broadway production was still in the works, parts of the opera were performed in Malta during the Welcome Europe celebrations in May 2004. The music was accompanied by a dazzling light and fireworks show, giving the audience a taste of what was to come. In July 2004, Waters released 2 new songs online, both with powerful anti-war messages. To Kill the Child was inspired by the 2003 invasion of Iraq, while Leaving Beirut reflected his travels in the Middle East as a teenager. These songs showcased Waters' ongoing commitment to using his music as a platform for social and political commentary. In June 2006, Roger Waters embarked on a 2-year-long journey to revisit one of Pink Floyd's most iconic albums, The Dark Side of the Moon, with his Dark Side of the Moon Live World Tour. The concerts were a feast for the senses, divided into 2 parts. The first half featured a mix of Pink Floyd classics and Waters' solo material, while the second half was a full performance of The Dark Side of the Moon. This marked the first time in over 3 decades that Waters had performed the entire album live. The shows were a visual and auditory spectacle, thanks to concert lighting designer Mark Brickman. Imagine laser lights dancing across the stage, fog swirling around the performers, pyrotechnics erupting in bursts of color, and psychedelic projections swirling on massive screens. But the real showstoppers were the inflatable floating puppets, including the iconic Spaceman and Pig, each controlled by a handler dressed as a butcher. And the sound? A mind-blowing 360-degree quadraphonic sound system that enveloped the audience in a sonic experience like no other. To add a touch of nostalgia, Nick Mason, Pink Floyd's drummer, joined Waters for some of the shows, performing alongside him during the Dark Side of the Moon set and encores. It was a special treat for fans who missed seeing them play together. In March 2007, Waters' music found its way to the big screen. His song, Hello, I Love You, was featured in the science fiction film The Last Mimsy. Waters described the song as capturing the movie's themes of the clash between good and evil and the power of innocence. Waters continued to perform, playing at the Coachella Festival in California in 2008. He was also scheduled to headline Live Earth 2008 in Mumbai, India, but the concert was cancelled after the tragic terrorist attacks in the city. The Wall Live Tour was a massive success, becoming the highest-grossing tour by a solo artist by 2013. Waters also performed at a benefit concert for Hurricane Sandy relief in 2012, showcasing his commitment to using his music for good causes. Finally, after a long wait, Waters released his first solo album in nearly 25 years, Is This the Life We Really Want?, in 2017. This album, produced by Radiohead producer Nigel Godrich, was a critical success and marked a return to Waters' signature sound. He toured North America in 2017 with the Us Plus Them tour, performing a mix of Pink Floyd and solo material. In the following years, Waters continued to explore new artistic avenues, narrating an adaptation of Igor Stravinsky's The Soldier's Tale, and even joining Nick Mason's band on stage for a special performance. He remains a prominent figure in the music world, his influence and creativity continuing to inspire generations of musicians and fans. In January 2020, Roger Waters announced a new arena tour titled This Is Not a Drill. It was meant to be a big North American tour, wrapping up just before the 2020 presidential election. But then the pandemic hit, and everything changed. The tour was postponed until 2022, and when it finally happened, it was a huge success, with shows across North America and later expanded to Europe in 2023. Waters used the tour as a platform to share his political views and social commentary, making it more than just a concert experience. During the pandemic lockdown, Waters kept busy. He started writing a memoir, reflecting on his life and career. And in December 2022, he surprised fans with an EP called The Lockdown Sessions, featuring new versions of some of his most beloved songs from both his solo career and Pink Floyd. But perhaps the most significant project in recent years was Waters' reimagining of Pink Floyd's iconic album, The Dark Side of the Moon. Released in 2023 to mark the album's 50th anniversary, The Dark Side of the Moon Redux features spoken word sections, and no guitar solos, a departure from the original sound. Waters wanted to bring out the emotional and spiritual essence of the album, adding a layer of wisdom and reflection that comes with age. In October 2023, Waters took this new version on the road, performing 2 special concerts at the London Palladium. These shows were more than just musical performances. They were a platform for Waters to share his thoughts on various topics, including the plight of Julian Assange and excerpts from his unpublished memoir. Roger Waters, beyond his musical talents, has been a vocal advocate for Palestine in the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He strongly supports the boycott, divestment, and sanctions (BDS) movement, which calls for international pressure on Israel to change its policies towards Palestinians. Waters first witnessed the Israeli West Bank barrier in 2006, a sight that deeply disturbed him. He moved a scheduled concert from Tel Aviv to Nave Shalom and called for the barrier's removal, describing it as an appalling edifice and criticizing the aggressive behavior of the Israeli soldiers guarding it. He has also repeatedly referred to Israel's treatment of Palestinians as apartheid. Waters' activism has extended to criticizing artists who perform in Israel, including Bon Jovi, Radiohead, and Nick Cave. He has also narrated a documentary about Israel's public relations efforts in the United States. However, Waters' outspokenness has sparked controversy and accusations of anti-Semitism. In 2013, he was criticized for using a giant pig balloon with a Star of David at his concerts. Waters defended himself, stating that it was one of several religious and political symbols used in the show and not meant to single out Judaism. That same year, he made a controversial comparison between Israel's treatment of Palestinians and Nazi Germany, drawing condemnation from the Anti-Defamation League and other Jewish organizations. Waters defended his remarks, saying that he was criticizing Israeli policies, not Jewish people, and accusing Israel of using the term anti-Semitism to silence criticism. In 2017, Waters again drew comparisons between Israeli public diplomacy and Nazi propaganda, further fueling accusations of anti-Semitism. A documentary film, Wish You Weren't Here, was even made, accusing Waters of anti-Semitism and hindering peace efforts in the region. More recently, in 2020, Major League Baseball stopped advertising Waters' concerts after facing criticism from Jewish groups. He also made controversial statements about American businessman Sheldon Adelson, suggesting that Adelson believed only Jewish people are fully human. He further sparked outrage by claiming that the technique used to kill George Floyd was developed by the Israeli Defense Forces and used to murder Palestinians. On February 25, 2023, a concert in Frankfurt, Germany, by Waters was canceled. The reason was that they believed Waters was one of the most known anti-Semites, citing his support for BDS, the images at his concerts, and his meetings with the militant group Hamas. The Central Council of Jews in Germany and the Frankfurt Jewish community supported this choice. Waters, however, disagreed and hired a German law firm to fight the cancellation. A court in Germany later agreed with Waters, stating that the concert should be seen as a work of art that doesn't support Nazi ideas. Later on, in May, the German police opened an investigation against Waters for possibly inciting hate due to the Nazi-style outfit he wore during a performance in Berlin. Even though such symbols are banned in Germany, they can be used for artistic or educational purposes. Israel's foreign ministry and the U.S. Department of State criticized Waters for this outfit as well. Waters said he used the outfit to oppose fascism, injustice, and prejudice. He also noted that he had worn similar outfits since 1980, but this was the first time he got criticized for it. Waters believed the backlash was politically motivated and partly due to the Israeli lobby in Germany. He called the accusations of anti-Semitism a lie and a personal attack. In May 2023, a British MP, Christian Wakeford, criticized Waters' shows. Waters responded at a concert in London by calling Wakeford uninformed and accusing his critics of being controlled by the Israeli government. This response created controversy again. In 1969, Roger Waters married his childhood sweetheart, Judith Trim. She was a school teacher and potter, and her artistic touch even graced the cover of Pink Floyd's album Umaguma. But their marriage, like many others, wasn't meant to last. They divorced in 1975, and sadly, Judith passed away in 2001. Waters didn't stay single for long. In 1976, he married Carolyn Christie, a woman with a prestigious family background. They had 2 children together, a son named Harry, who would later follow in his father's footsteps as a musician, and a daughter named India, who pursued a career in modeling. But this marriage also ended in divorce in 1992. Just a year later, Waters tied the knot again, this time with Priscilla Phillips. They welcomed a son named Jack Fletcher into the world, but their marriage, like the others before it, ended in divorce in 2001. Love found Waters once more in 2004 when he became engaged to actress and filmmaker Lauri Durning. They were married in 2012, but sadly their relationship ended in divorce in 2015. But Waters' journey of love didn't end there. In 2021, he found happiness again and married his 5th wife, Camila Chavez. Throughout his life, Waters has maintained homes in both Long Island and Hampshire. He's also open about his beliefs, identifying as an atheist.